What if not all descendants of Israel could be called Jews? What if being Israeli didn't automatically mean being Jewish? These questions about identity seem simple, but they actually hide complex layers that many are still trying to understand today. After all, is Israel just a land, or a people too? And when did the word Jew actually appear, and what does it represent? Let's demystify these ancient and intriguing terms and understand how they are intertwined in the divine covenant. Who were the first Israelites? And what really distinguishes an Israelite from a Jew? The answer goes back to Abraham, the patriarch whose faith and obedience led God to promise him descendants as numerous as the stars. This promise was passed on to Isaac and, later, to Jacob, who, after wrestling with an angel in Genesis 32, was renamed Israel. From then on, his sons gave rise to the 12 tribes of Israel, united by the same covenant and collective identity as Israelites. However, this initial unity would soon face changes. The term Jew did not yet exist, and all Jacob's descendants were simply Israelites. But after Solomon's reign, the kingdom split. The north kept the name Israel, while the south became known as Judah. This period brought out distinctions that deeply marked both peoples and their territories, creating new identities that influenced generations. When the northern kingdom was destroyed by the Assyrians in 722 BC, the 10 tribes of Israel were scattered, earning them the reputation of the lost tribe. The southern kingdom, Judah, resisted for longer, preserving its traditions in Jerusalem. There, the term Jew emerged, initially restricted to those from the kingdom of Judah. With the Babylonian exile in 586 BC, the identity of the Jews was strengthened, because even though they were far from their homeland, they maintained their faith and customs, consolidating an adaptable and resilient culture and religious practice. After returning to their land under Cyrus' decree, the Jews began to rebuild the temple and strengthen their identity. Some returned, but others remained scattered, establishing communities and carrying on their traditions. In this way, Jew became not just an ethnicity or geographical reference, but an enduring commitment to Yahweh-centered practices and beliefs, passed down beyond physical borders, from generation to generation. If this journey through Israel's history is bringing you new perspectives, subscribe to the channel, share this video, and join us as we reveal every detail of this spiritual and historical journey. With the Babylonian exile of 586 BC, the Jewish people faced the challenge of preserving their faith far from their land and temple. This period forced a redefinition of their spiritual and cultural identity, something that remains visible in Judaism today. Even after the schism that separated the Kingdom of Israel to the north and the Kingdom of Judah to the south around 930 BC, Judah's exile and return consolidated a firm commitment to traditions and the covenant with God. This loyalty took deep root, allowing the Jewish people to maintain their religious and cultural identity over generations. While the northern kingdom, made up of the 10 tribes, was destroyed by the Assyrians in 722 BC, and its inhabitants dispersed, the kingdom of Judah survived a little longer. However, in 586 BC, the Babylonian Empire conquered Judah, and many were taken into captivity. The 10 tribes, known as the Lost Tribes, lost their cultural and religious ties, while the people of Judah maintained their traditions and faith, sustained by the Torah and the Mosaic teachings. This strengthened an identity that remained alive even in foreign lands. During the Babylonian exile, the term Jew came to define those who maintained the legacy of the tribe of Judah and the spiritual center in Jerusalem. About 70 years later, in 538 BC, King Cyrus of Persia allowed the exiles to return to their land, rebuilding the temple and restoring religious practice. This act reinforced the vision of the term Jew as a symbol not only of ethnicity, but of commitment to the divine covenant, differentiating them from any specific tribal ethnic identity. This return was not just physical, but a spiritual and cultural rebirth that would guide the Jewish community for centuries. In the post-exile period, the figure of the rabbi emerged as a teacher and interpreter of the Torah, leading the Jewish people in religious laws and practices. This was the beginning of Rabbinic Judaism, which established the study of the Torah as a central pillar of Jewish life. More than any tribal lineage, this practice became the essence of being Jewish, consolidating a bond with God that transcended geography. Today, Jewish identity encompasses both a cultural heritage and a religious practice. Many Jews, in addition to following religious teachings, celebrate cultural traditions, including holidays such as Passover and Hanukkah, and preserve customs and languages such as Hebrew, Yiddish, or Ladino. Thus, being Jewish connects to an ancestral legacy that echoes back to ancient Israel, especially through the descendants of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, who have kept their heritage alive through the generations. Jewish identity, whether expressed through religious or cultural practices or through descent, is rooted in the original covenant established with the God of Israel. With the founding of the State of Israel in 1948, a new dimension emerged for the Jewish people, providing a home after centuries of persecution and displacement. This new state was envisioned as a safe place where Jewish culture and religion could flourish freely. However, the formation of this nation introduced a difference between Jewish and Israeli identity. Being Israeli came to designate citizenship within a modern country with a Jewish majority, but which is home to diverse ethnic groups, including Muslim Arabs, Christians, Druze, and Bedouins. Thus, Israeli nationality is not limited to the Jewish faith, while the term Jew preserves a spiritual and cultural connection with the ancient covenant. The Bible presents God making promises to the people of Israel since Abraham's call around 2000 BC, promises that form the basis of Israel's identity as the people of the covenant. This special relationship spans generations, from Abraham to Isaac and Jacob, right up to the 12 tribes of Israel. The covenant with God was renewed at Sinai with Moses around 1446 BC, establishing the law that would guide the people's lives. Even in the midst of exiles and periods of disobedience, God's covenant was never annulled. Prophets like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel proclaimed the hope of a future restoration, foreseeing a time when God would gather Israel from all over the world. In Ezekiel, chapters 36 to 37, there is a vision of spiritual and physical rebirth for Israel, while Zechariah 12 verse 10 foreshadows the time when the people will turn completely to God and recognize the Messiah. Jesus also mentioned Israel and Jerusalem in his predictions about the end times in Matthew 24, positioning Israel as a central point in God's final plan. These prophecies underline the role that Israel will play not only for itself, but as a blessing for all nations. In Isaiah 49 verse 6, God declares that the Messiah would be a light to the Gentiles, offering salvation to the whole earth. The fulfillment of this promise is seen in Jesus, through whom the covenant of blessing extended beyond Israel, inviting Jews and Gentiles to form a new spiritual family in faith. However, Israel's unique calling remains. In Romans 11, the Apostle Paul explains that God has not abandoned his promises to Israel, but that Israel's final restoration is part of a comprehensive plan. Paul describes Gentiles being grafted into Israel's olive tree, an analogy that illustrates the shared heritage between Jews and Gentiles, while preserving Israel's central role. From the beginning, Israel's purpose was not just to be a separate people, but to serve as a channel of God's blessings to the world. God's promise to Abraham in Genesis 12 verse 3, "All the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you," points to Israel's universal mission. Through this people, God revealed his law, raised up prophets, and finally sent the Messiah. This narrative has shaped cultures and brought hope to millions, profoundly influencing human history. The people of Israel are a living testimony to God's enduring promises and his faithfulness. In them, we find a symbol of resilience, perseverance, and faith that transcends the ages, crossing time and cultures. For believers, Israel represents the ongoing fulfillment of God's promises and the hope of redemption. Every believer, when reflecting on Israel's history, is reminded that they participate in a narrative that spans generations and extends to all peoples and nations. Israel's connection with God remains an inspiring story of covenant and promise, with a still central role in the future of redemption and restoration of creation. Curious to uncover more mysteries and fascinating stories from the Bible? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way you won't miss any content about this universe full of discoveries. Together, we'll dive into every detail and uncover what lies behind each passage.